Welcome and welcome back to the channel once again, my dear internet friends. In today's video, we are going to talk about APS-C versus full-frame lenses, or maybe other sensors too. We are going to cover a lot of topics. I'm going to use the whiteboard from Canva to draw certain things to show you and explain the concepts to understand if the lenses, the APS-C versus full frame, is lighter, cheaper, and probably more cost effective and heavier, right? Or the size bigger or smaller. So there are a lot of questions, right? This has been going on for a long time in choosing the cameras or even the ecosystem, right? So if you're thinking of getting a Micro Four Thirds camera because of the lighter lenses or maybe the cheaper options that you have in the market, probably you might want to decide based on the lens ecosystem that's there, or a lot of questions around this topic. And I want to clarify the basics first. So what are the APS-C lenses in the first place, right? So if you are thinking about buying any cameras, then you have three different options. Like if you are considering interchangeable lens cameras, mirrorless cameras, of course. We are in the digital age, no more DSLRs, and I wouldn't recommend you buying any DSLRs today unless you want to modify them for IR sensors to capture some, star or astrophotography, right? So, when we consider the mirrorless cameras, we have three major options. Of course, you can also consider the medium format cameras, medium format sensor cameras, but they all fall under the category of interchangeable mirrorless cameras, interchangeable lens mirrorless cameras. So when you're planning to change the lens, right? So you have to buy the lens from the several manufacturers, like whether third-party lens manufacturers or the camera brand manufacturers. Like let's say, for example, the medium format cameras are manufactured by several brands like Hasselblad, Fujifilm, etc. And if you were to buy those lenses, they will be fine. But also there are other third-party lens manufacturers as well. And depending on what sensor the camera is, the lenses you pair with those cameras are what the lenses are. So for example, let me open this one. So let's say, let me put this here. So let's say we have let me click on this. Okay. So let's say we have this sensor and whatever this may be, like APS-C or full frame or medium format or even Micro Four Thirds, MFTs, let's say MFTs, right? So depending on the sensor size, whatever lens you pair with that cover the entire sensor, that is the kind of lens it is called as. So you can call it as Micro Four Thirds lens, or you can call it as APS-C lens, or you can call it as a medium format lens. So the lens should be capable of reflecting or like refract all the light that's falling onto the lens to the sensor. So that's the idea. And these lenses are called based on the sensor itself. So remember, like when an APS-C lens is called an APS-C lens, not because of the lens itself. The lens doesn't have any crops. The lens is made to uh, focus all the light that's going into the lens into the sensor. So that's where we are going into the next part of the major difference between the full frame and the APS-C lenses, right? So whether whatever sensor it may be, whether it is full frame lens, full frame sensor or APS-C sensor or a Micro Four Thirds sensor, whatever sensor it may be, the major difference is actually for the lens is the image circle. So how the light is being transferred, right? So for example, let's say here we have the sensor and I'm going to show it in the side view. So this is the sensor from the side view, and here we have the lens elements, right? So the light is passing this way and it's going to converge onto the plane of the sensor. So the lenses are made in such a way that, let me change to a different color actually. Okay. Yeah. So these light rays are coming into the lens and they need to converge onto the sensor. And depending on the sensor size, these lenses need to be bigger or smaller. It doesn't mean that the bigger the lens means the better is the optics. No, some of the Sigma lenses are humongous, but their optics is so-so. So let me explain even further. Here we have, let's say, for example, another sensor. This is, let's say this is a full frame sensor. Sorry, let's say this is a micro four thirds sensor. You might just need a micro four thirds lens, which is pretty small, right? You just need this size of the lens to converge all the light onto the sensor. Now, let's say you take up a bigger sensor, right? So let's say we compare the full frame sensor with the micro four thirds sensor. You obviously need a bigger lens. So that's the idea, right? You basically need to converge all the light onto the sensor. Now, if we go back to this field of view, like here you can see this is the micro four thirds sensor, this is the full frame sensor, and if you were to pair a APS-C lens, let me just remove these two, right? So if you were to just pair a APS-C lens, this is the APS-C sensor, onto the full frame body. So these are the borders that will be cut off. The light doesn't fall on those sensor areas, and that's why you get vignetting when you were to pair a APS-C lens on a full frame body. And the same goes for mounting a micro four thirds lens onto APS-C camera, which never happens, right? We don't mount a micro four thirds lens on an APS-C body just because the lens is smaller, lighter, or cheaper, right? So, but we do the other way around. We mount a full frame lens onto an APS-C body. So if I were to just remove this lens and think about this, all the light from the lens is converging to the tiny sensor that is comparable to, compared to the full frame sensor, the APS-C sensor is quite tiny. And imagine mounting a full frame lens onto this APS-C sensor. You get all the light, all the goodness of the lens converging to the APS-C sensor. And that's why if you were to mount a full frame lens onto an APS-C camera, you get a much better quality because you don't get any of the vignetting from the lens. You don't get any of the waves that might be caused due to the edges of the bigger, humongous, wide lenses, right? So you get a better quality of image because all the rays are converged to a smaller area towards the center of the lens. And that's why mounting a full frame lens onto an APS-C camera gives you a better image than mounting an APS-C lens on a full frame camera, right? Your optical flaws are exaggerated if you were to mount the other way around. So now let's do this, right? So that's why image circle, understanding it is a most important thing, right? So here you can see, if you were to think about the numbers, the full frame lenses need to be like converging all the light to approximately 36 by 24 millimeters, right? That sensor area, which is pretty big, right? So, and also you can see all the empty spaces around the sensor. These lights are getting wasted. And whenever you see all the vignetting on a full frame lens, especially if you were to use very wide lenses, it's because there is a tiny bit of light going on the corners. If the lens is not made to converge more than the sensor area, there is a loss of light in the corners of the sensors, and that's why we see a lot of vignetting, especially for wider lenses. But if we were to use the telelens, this is not that of a of an issue, because again, let's consider this part, right? So this is the sensor, and okay, let me do it in this planar view. We'll take this as the lens, sorry, yeah, sensor, and we have the lens over here. And this lens, I'm sorry, I'm very, very poor at drawing. So yeah, forgive me for that. Okay, let me redraw again. So let me say this is the lens, and let me use the red color for the lens. Sorry, the previous thing was the sensor. And this is a semi-tele lens, for example. This is converging the light from a very far distance, right? And the field of view is narrower than the wide angle lens, which means it doesn't have to converge too much to the edges, right? It just need to converge a little bit, but not too much. That's why you see less of a vignetting when you're using the tele lenses. But when you're using the wider lenses, it need to converge. The front element is humongous, so bulbous. It need to converge light from everywhere, from the sides, from the corners, and everywhere. And that's why when it is trying to converge all these corner light rays, it may not be as effective of thing to fall on the corners of the sensors. So that's the biggest problem with the wide angle lenses. And it's the same goes for the APS-C lenses too, because they are covering a much smaller sensor. So oops, we'll go back to the chart later. Okay, I want to explain a lot more based on the chart. So yeah, this is the basic understanding of the image circle, basic understanding of the lenses and the light rays falling on the sensor. Now that you have understood the basics, if you have any doubts, you can ask me, but I don't think there's anyone who's even watching this video. But anyway, I will move on, right? So the bottom line is the image circle matters. Using bigger lenses will help converge larger light into the sensor, and it will have a bigger image circle, thereby giving all the light necessary to the sensor to make the image. Now, the second part is the goal. So what is the goal, right? So you want to achieve a specific look in your photography. That's why you choose different focal lengths, and to achieve that, let's say deeper field of view or shallower field of view, depending on what type of photography you do. For example, if you're doing portraits, there's a different field of view, different frame that you want to get, like shallower depth of field, so that you make everything blur except for the subject. Or if you want to do wide angle photography, where you want to use a very deeper field of view, deeper aperture focal plane to get everything in focus. So depending on what type of photography you want to do, your lens selection will vary. Since that's the case, we are gonna take a few situations here, right? So to achieve a certain goal, you will be choosing a certain focal length. And to choose the focal length and the aperture of the lenses, we need to understand what is the goal. So that's the most important thing. And depending on the sensor crop, you might want to buy certain lenses. Let's talk about the first lens we have in the list. This is 50mm f1.2. To understand this chart, let me explain a bit, right? So here we have the full frame, lenses, prices, weight, and whatnot, right? And here we have the APS-C equivalent of the same. When I mention any lens that is made for APS-C, I put their price and weight on the right side. When I mention any lenses made for full frame, I mention the price and weight on this full frame column. Now, we have this list where we start with the 50mm. Let's say you're in portrait industry. You might want a 50mm f1.2 to blur off the background, and you want f1.2. You shoot a lot in low light, so you want to keep the ISO down, so you want to get f1.2. Now, this aperture and the focal length are the properties of the lenses. But this crop is a property of the sensor. These aperture and focal length again are the property of lens. That doesn't change, that is fixed. That's why I put up the definition of the focal length over here. So it is the distance from the center of the lens to the imaging point, that is the focal plane, right? So that is what a focal length is. It's a property of a lens. What is aperture? Aperture is how big the lens opens, right? We all have seen aperture blades, so we know what an aperture is. How wide the lens can open is called an aperture, and these two are inherent property of the lens. Now, when this lens is mounted on a full frame body, it produces such an image depending on the sensor, right? When all the light is refracted into the lens, falling on the sensor, making the image, it produces a look. Now that is called the field of view, the horizontal pixels versus the vertical pixels is called the field of view. And here, the APS-C sensor field of view is what is this column is. So if you were to take a lens, any lens, whether it is made for a full frame camera or an APS-C camera, when you mount it on a certain type of camera with a certain type of sensor, then you get this type of field of view. And that is depending on the crop of the sensor compared to the full frame sensor. So let's say, for example, this full frame sensor is the horizontal number of pixel is this horizontal length is 35 millimeters versus the vertical length is 24 millimeters. And the let me go back to this, right? If you were to divide these two, you get like 1.5 times crop. That's how they calculate how small it is. 1.5 times smaller than, I mean, the APS-C sensor is 1.5 times smaller than the full frame sensor. And that's where we get this crop. Now, if the sensor is getting smaller and smaller, what happens is the image, that is the light. What is image, right? It is the light that the lens sees that is refracted to the sensor is converted as an image. And this image is taking up only this part of the light, as I showed here. So let's say this is the big lens that we have. It's creating such a huge image circle. But if I were to remove these, right, you can see this entire part is cropped 1.5 times, and it can only produce image to this size sensor. And that's why we get a crop. Now, if it were to produce this size image, there is no crop, right? Now, let me just take all these things and put it in the whiteboard so we don't have to go back there, right? Yeah, so let me talk in this point of view, right? So we will remove this APS-C lens, we'll remove this APS-C sensor, right? APS-C lens again is a lens mounted on the APS-C sensor. That's it. It's made to create only this much image circle. It's not going to give you this image circle. That's what APS-C means, right? Yeah, we shouldn't forget throughout this topic, we are not going to consider APS-C lens as anything else other than what I said. Right, now coming back to this, it's going to produce a crop factor of 1.5 times, and this is what we get. When you mount a 50 millimeter lens on a APS-C camera, we get 75 millimeter field of view because of all the physical properties I just showed you. Now, the aperture, on the other hand, is a bit different. So aperture is the property of the lens, of course, how wide the lens can open, and also it is creating a shallower or deeper field of focal plane. So what is a focal plane, you may ask? So let me explain it this way. Now, focal plane is like, let's say, for example, we have nose, we have a human, right? Okay, put a lot of things. Let's say we have a human here, and we have the eyes of the human, we have the hair, right? Let's say a good handsome looking guy, for example, and this guy is standing here. If let's consider him to be X, right? So Mr. X over here, he is just chilling. Now I want to take a photo of him. What happens here is when I use a full frame camera with f1.2 aperture, it's going to create this shallow, very shallow plane, right? Oops. So it's going to consider or focus the light from this very shallow plane. That's it. It's going to have the thickness of the plane is just very, very tiny. Maybe probably like 1 to 3 millimeters. And this again depends on how far away the subject is from the camera or the sensor, right? So if it is like closer, this plane of focus will change. And if the subject is further away, this plane of focus will change. So depending on how far or close the subject is, this plane of focus will change, right? So always remember that. But if you were to use a wider aperture lens, then you get shallower depth of field. Shallower as in like this plane thickness, the focus plane thickness will be becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's where these portrait lenses are flourishing. Basically, they have this very shallow depth of field, creating very blurry, buttery, smooth bokehs, and that is very pleasing for eyes for some people, but my wife doesn't like it. So yeah, different people, different needs, different likes, right? So understanding this plane of focus is important, and to create this plane of focus, we have this reference value, right? So this is f1.2, which means very thin plane of focus. But if you were to mount the same on the APS-C lens, again, that plane of focus is multiplied by 1.5 times, and we get 1.8. It's not exactly like multiplied. It's just because the distance that I was talking about, the focal distance also changes, which means it is giving you a look as if the 75mm lens is mounted on a full frame camera. That's the difference. As you can see here, this 50mm mounted on a full frame camera is equivalent to 75mm, 50mm mounted on an APS-C camera is equivalent to 75mm mounted on a full frame camera. And if you were to consider the price for a 75mm full frame lens, that's going to be just 300. So if you want to create this look of a full frame camera on an APS-C sensor, you will have to spend this much, which is staggering amount, and you have to buy a lens weighing this much, right? But if you were to consider the same for a full frame camera, you just get you just have to spend $300, and you just need to, you get a lens that's weighing only 230 bucks. This is all USD. Sorry, I think I spoke the other way. You're spending 300 bucks to get a lens weighing 230, which is very, very close. But the thing is, if you had to buy this lens, you get a much better image quality, because these lenses are pretty expensive. They have near flawless optical performance. Like, they don't have much of aberrations, they don't have much of vignetting, whatnot, right? And they do create some buttery smooth images, which you will get when you mount it on the APS-C lens, APS-C camera as well. But the problem is you don't get the same field of view, or you may not get the same buttery bokeh, right? At a wider field of view, you don't get the wide image that you are looking for. But if the 75mm field of view is what you're going for, then there are better options in the full frame camera. So this is the first part, okay? There are more parts to come. It is a pretty ambiguous topic. Like I said, it's not like, the APS-C is not exactly cheaper or lighter, or the full frame is a better option. No, I'm not going to talk anything like that. It is an ambiguous topic. We are getting in details. We are analyzing how the market is, how this camera industry is, and what are the better options actually, right? The full frame is not always required, but when it is required, you have good options. Now, number two, for APS-C cameras, we have a lot more options, right? Now, for APS-C, we have 27mm f1.2. When mounted on a full frame, it is still 27mm f1.2. It's a property of the lens that never changes. Now, when it is mounted on the APS-C camera, on the other hand, we get 40mm field of view and 1.8 aperture, f1.8 aperture focal depth. Now, the price of that lens is 578 USD and the weight is 560 grams. Are there any equivalent lenses for the full frame? Like, for example, is there any 40mm f1.8 lens for full frame? I don't see any. But there is a 35mm f1.8 lens, which costs actually more, 748 USD, but only weighs 281 grams, like half of the weight. So which one to choose? Hey, okay, just based on this lens, I cannot buy an APS-C camera, or just based on 35mm f1.8 lens, I cannot buy a full frame camera. Which is the right way to go? Like, people get confused, right? I would say you have to understand the 90% of photography needs before buying a camera, and depending on the camera, you are going to choose the lens. What comes first? Whether you have to choose the camera before buying your first camera or lens, before getting into any ecosystem, whether you need to consider the type of photography or buy the camera and think about what genre you're going to photograph, right? That is super important. So that's why I want to go back to that goal that I was talking about. What is your need? What is the type of photography you want to do? What is the end goal for your photography needs? Are you just an enthusiast? Are you just a person who's photographing for hobbies, right? You have to consider all these things before buying your camera. And going full frame is never wrong, right? Like, you get a lot of benefits going full frame. For example, you get very good dynamic range, very low ISO noise, and whatnot. You might probably get some better image quality just by having more pixels. Like, for example, I stick with my Sony a7C II and the Sony a7CR, and both are great cameras. But if you were to consider the other options in the market, I used to use Sony a6700, which produces noisier image. But was I like super unsatisfied with the camera? Not at all. There is a super good use for a6700. I made at least 40 videos using those APS-C cameras. But overall, I would prefer full frame cameras, even though the lens might be a bit pricier. They create some amazing footages, right? Depending on your needs, you might want to choose whatever is available. Now, let's say you want to choose a versatile lens. Sigma just announced this 17 to 40mm f1.8 lens. That is super crazy. And so if we were to compare that lens, that is a very good option for APS-C camera users. Right, so here I made a quick comparison. Here it is giving like 25.5 to 60mm full frame equivalent with 2.8 full frame equivalent, 2.7, just, mathematics. And the price is also 919 US dollars, and the weight is 525 grams. Now, if you were to find a equivalent lens, yeah, I just got a comment. I will reply to your comment, just a minute. So if you were to find any equivalent lens for the full frame cameras, you got two options here. Either you choose a 28 to 75mm Tamron lens, which is $800 and weighing still more than APS-C lens, and we have 24 to 70 from Sigma, right? We have these two options. I'll come back to this in just a minute. Let me read out the chat. Hello from Ukraine, from Sony A6700 user. Thanks so much for the reviews. Hey, thanks for joining the live stream from Ukraine. Yeah, very glad to help you out with the contents. I'll keep making more, so don't worry about it. Now, yeah, let's come back to this 24 to 70 millimeter. It's a versatile focal length. This is a very good option for APS-C camera users. And comparing them to the full frame options we have, it is a very compelling option. So I would say in this case, if you are using a APS-C camera, this is a very good option to go with. I mean, in this case, it is cheaper and lighter, probably not so compact, but more compact than the existing options we have. So yeah, for standard focal lens, yeah, APS-C would make a more sense. But in the long run, right? If you think about having very less ISO noise or very good dynamic range, again, the sensor matters. You cannot ignore the quality of the sensors. Bigger sensors, more light, more quality. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, depends on whether you are satisfied with the APS-C sensor or not. We have wide angle photography too. So I like to shoot landscape photos and landscape videos. I like to time lapse. I would rather use an APS-C lens like this one. 10 to 20 millimeter f4. It is EPZ. That is, it's got the power zoom on it. It's super good for videos. I used to use ZV-E10, and this one 10 to 20 millimeter is an excellent lens, very sharp. Now for that, we have the full frame equivalent to 15 to 30 millimeter f6. That is not so great aperture, right? On a APS-C camera, f6 is like super dark, and you might want to bump up the ISO pretty high, which you don't want to. But if you were to pair it with the full frame camera, if you crop in 1.5 times, the dynamic range of the sensor still stays the same, and you get all the benefits of smaller and lighter options, which is great. I'll come back to that later, but for now, I want you to understand the full frame options we have for similar focal lengths, right? We have 16 to 35 f4, that is also power zoom, that is a bit more heavier and bit more expensive, but the benefit you get is the image quality, right? You cannot ignore the sensor performance. We do have a full frame option for this lens, and it's got a brighter aperture. If we consider the alternative, that's the third-party option we have from Sigma, they make a 2.8 lenses, right? So this f2.8 is pretty close to f4 APS-C, but the problem is there might be some issues with the focusing. It may not be as stable, as compatible with the dynamic active steady shot that we have in the Sony going on. Right, there are so many other issues, but it is lighter, it is cheaper, it is smaller. So yeah, in these two cases, the standard focal length and the wider option, yeah, the APS-C lenses could be technically lighter and cheaper. But if you are thinking about portraits, it's obvious that going full frame makes more sense. If you're making money out of your portrait photography, just go with the full frame cameras and the lenses. But for any other things, for your casual photography, for wide angle, whatever, right? You might want to stick with APS-C cameras. Okay, so here we have a comment. It's more dependent on the lenses than sensor. With 1.4 f2 lenses, you get great results on APS-C. I shoot with Sigma. Yes. Yeah, I mean, A6700 is a great camera, and f1.4 is great too. I used to use Fujifilm X-T4 with the 23 f1.4. Great combination. I used to use 16mm f1.4 too. Great lens. But the thing is, I think I made a comparison video between the A6700 and A7C II in the channel. Yeah, I have a lot of comparison videos, and I find that for my requirement, I mean, it's completely subjective, right? You might be satisfied, like I said, f1.4 on the APS-C term is like f2.1 on the full frame equivalent. And so if you're satisfied with it, great. I mean, it's up to your satisfactory results, but I wasn't satisfied. I'm sorry. I switched to A7C2. And yeah, for me, 1.8 matters in low light conditions, and full frame f1.8 giving me great results. Yeah. I'm not going to this outrageous f1.2. That's totally not necessary for any hobbyist, enthusiast, or even for YouTubers, right? I don't think 1.2 is necessary, but having 1.2 option is always great. Now, yeah, moving on to the next topic, that is the telephoto lenses. There are very few options for telephoto lenses, especially beyond 350 millimeter focal length, right? Up to 350 millimeter focal length, any of the APS-C lenses would do. For example, we have 17 to 350 millimeter, 70 to 350 millimeter APS-C lens for A6700. That performs great, but using the 70 to 300 millimeter lens gave me a better performance in terms of optical stabilization. That is the most ignored lens in the world, the full frame lens 70 to 300. So that's something I really wanted to talk about in a different video. So yeah, we usually mount the 200 to 600 millimeter full frame lens onto the A6700 for wildlife photography, and there's not much options that we can discuss about. We also have the third-party options, but not much of APS-C options. So if you are into wildlife, we have only full frame options apparently. So yeah. Okay, so we have a comment asking about the overheating issues of A7C2. Yeah, so as you can see here in my channel, let me see if I can show you my channel. Just give me a second. Okay, so let me just quickly go here. All right, so this is my channel, and you can see in the past, since when, right? So for the past 12 videos, I've been using A7C2. So recently, A7C2 got this dynamic active stabilization update, and it works fantastic. I mean, awesome. Okay, just before that update, I was thinking A6700 stabilization is better than A7C2 stabilization, so I was super happy with using the A6700 for handheld videos. After this update on the A7C2, man, that is super awesome, amazing. It's like mind-blowing. I recommend you to watch this video, the dynamic active stabilization video, and it was fantastic. I'm super impressed. Now I don't need a gimbal. I just got the DJI RS Mini 4, and I'm like, why the hell did I get it? So yeah, regarding the overheating, I took it for several trips. I shot all these outdoors on, Thailand condition. Thailand environment is pretty hot. Like even sitting in the room, turning on the air condition, it's super, super hot. And yeah, right now I'm using the DJI Pocket 3 to do this live streaming. But if I need to have a second camera, I always go with the A7C2. Overheating is non-existent unless you shoot 60 frames per second for over 20 minutes continuously. So that's the limit for it. I think I explained the limitations of overheating in this video, especially. Where is it? Yeah. So ISO noise 12,800. So in this video, I explained about the overheating issues. Shooting at a very very high ISOs for a long time is consuming a lot of power from the camera because, okay, let me explain what are the things that affect the overheating before anything else, right? We all understand that when we activate the network mode. That is like if you were to connect your camera with Bluetooth, that is the first thing that's gonna cause some overheating, right? You turn off or turn on the airplane mode in your camera, then you make sure that you're using the dynamic active stabilization only when it's necessary. Then you choose the right frame rate. So the frame rate affects the autofocus, the stabilization, the network, and finally, of all things, the ISO actually affects the overheating performance. And that's something that I noticed only in when I was filming this video in a very, very high ISO conditions. It overheated in 20 minutes, but otherwise, if you have your lighting set up, if you have your focus set up, you can record for a very long time. And with frame rates up to 24 frames per second, it never overheated, even in scorching sun, like 40 degrees outside. Okay, so overheating is a non-issue for me in using A7C II. I do contemplate thinking about, like, I do think about getting the FX2, but I think I will hold on until the A7 IV is announced. So let's see. What about 1 hour of 4K 30 frames per second interview on concerts? Let's put it this way, right? There are like so many things that I explained will cause the overheating. So if you were to use the HS, or no, don't use HS. If you're using S mode, the 4K S, XAVC S mode, and if you're turning off the active stabilization or any sort of stabilization because you're filming concert or you're filming 1 hour of video, placing the camera on the tripod, so turn everything off, make sure the autofocus is continuous, and what else, yeah, make sure that, I mean, if it is 1 hour, just get a um, fan, Ulanzi fan kind of thing. That really will help. And don't connect your cameras to any of the USB port except for charging. If you're charging your phone. Oh yeah, one more thing. So get a dummy battery. That actually helped me. So having a dummy battery will help you to control the heat as well. And yeah, it would be okay-ish, but you have to do a lot of things to control the heat from the camera. So I wouldn't recommend you to get it, but yeah, there are some settings that you can change to get that 1 hour thing going. 30 frames per second, that's kind of hard for the A7C II, or switch to the APS-C mode, probably less heat for that. Okay, so another comment. I think in 10 years time, we will be doing a lot of videos on very small cameras. I think there will be a huge market for the pocket. Yes, I totally agree. So yeah, I do agree with this. I like compact cameras and I have two of them. I don't want to go with heavier cameras because when I'm traveling, any gram savings is super helpful for me. I don't carry any camera cage. I don't carry any gear for my audio except my Sennheiser MK600, which I use it handheld. I don't use it on the camera mount. So I just put it in my pocket. When I need it, I take it out and I point towards the audio source, sound source, and I record the audio that way. And I also attach the DJI mic too with the Sennheiser MK600, and I put the receiver on top of the camera, and that's how I record audio. So very, very minimal audio, especially when I'm hiking, and that helps me. But I don't want to compromise on the image quality as well, right? The compact cameras like the Sony RX107 or anything like that compact. Like right now I have my Fujifilm X106 as well. Those are great cameras, but moving forward, I think I will still stick with full frame compact cameras than going with any smaller sensor. I don't want to really compromise on the image quality. And I do have a couple of G Master lenses, which are great, which is like a no-brainer for image quality if you want exceptional image quality, because you only travel to those places once, probably twice in your lifetime. So you better take all the images as you want in the highest quality possible, right? Portability is the goal. Correct. I picked up a DJI Pocket 3 and I do some videos on it, just where you put it in a little tripod. Yes, true. Honestly, it is good enough. Right now, I'm recording using the DJI Pocket 3. It's great for live streaming and it doesn't overheat. So the charge reduces over time, but it doesn't overheat. And also, the good thing about the Pocket 3 is that you don't need a high bitrate data cable to transfer this live streaming to whatever streaming platform you're recording with, right? So it's great. It's 1080p though, but still it's great. Okay, for the next comment, have you seen Apple log? Its quality is very close to the camera log quality. I barely see any difference between A7C2. Okay, great. Okay, so I don't use Apple log. I'm waiting for the next iPhone 17 to come so that my wife can buy it so I can play with it. I'm an Android user, so I stick with my Samsung S24 Ultra. That just got a recent log update, and the log quality from the phones are great as well. In the recent video, I think I showed you, yeah, in this video, probably something like the cinematic, right? Affordable, newer phone cage, that one. I made some cinematic videos. The Girl on a Mission, you can watch those videos. Half of those were filmed with the Samsung phone camera. And yes, it is pretty close, but we don't get as much dynamic range when mistakes happen. Phone quality is phone quality. It will be digital. It will be soft. You will see some obvious difference between using a full frame camera versus a phone camera side by side. You will definitely see some differences. Let me just show you on the screen. This obviously is the phone video, right? I put the like what camera is I'm using here, right? So these are from phone. It's close to bad, but if you were to, I mean, keep going, keep watching. This is from the camera. No, this is still phone. Let's see. This is from the camera though. So this is from A7C2 using 15mm f1.4 lens. I like APS-C lenses on a full frame body, especially for videos because it's smaller and lighter. Yeah, here I'm using the 15 f1.4 for all these purpose, right? I mean, if you get time, it's just 2 minutes video, you can go watch it. So yeah, you can also see how well the dynamic active stabilization in the A7C2 performs. Exceptional. Okay, I won't talk particularly about the Apple log. I mean, overall phone log quality, yes. Okay, in 10, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, now it's great already. I can use it for my actual travel vlogs, right? So it's showing some, yeah, I installed TubeBuddy for my channel. So yeah. Yeah, definitely 5-10 years. No, I think it will be sooner. If I correctly remembered, when the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra was announced, there was a specific filmmaker who actually used that phone to film his entire thing, and then the Apple phone was used to film a short movie or something. So it's already happening. Okay, we don't have to wait for 5-10 years. Maybe 3-4 years, we'll have really good image quality from the phone cameras. So yeah, you don't have to wait that long. And if you're thinking, hey, so what are we gonna do then? Are we gonna completely abandon all the mirrorless cameras and just switch to the phone? I would say no, not at all. You see, there's definitely a place for physics that's happening, right? The phone cameras are doing the computational photography and videography. To reduce the noise, they combine multiple frames to one frame and it becomes 24 frames per second. It's not exactly 24 frames per second, it's like 48 or 80, 96 frames per second happening with 3 frames combined together to give you the 24 frames per second to reduce the noise, to increase the quality of the resolution, whatnot, right? All these computational photography happen in the phone, which we don't see, and that's why my phone S24 Ultra overheats over time when I'm recording 4K 60 frames per second. So the phone can only do so much for you, and cameras do have a place. Cameras are irreplaceable because of their physical capabilities. They are big for a reason. They exist for a reason. The light that is falling on the sensor, giving some really detailed image, cannot be refuted, right? We have to understand that physics, it cannot be bent, and it can be bent only to some extent. And in the phones, it breaks beyond some extent. Like smaller sensors can only do so much without the computational photography. And I'm a kind of guy who is so analog that I would want to go back in time, and I want to use the previous DSLR sensors like my Nikon D500, right? That is my go-to camera. That was my go-to camera when it comes to wildlife or even some 4K filming, right? I used manual focus to film some birds and wildlife, and it was great. When I switched to my A6700, no, before that, I switched to my Panasonic G9 Mark II. Everybody says it's a great camera, but after using it for 4 months, I find it so digital, so it doesn't feel natural. You know, to get the natural look, you really need bigger sensors, you really need to have good glasses, and without that, you don't achieve that goal. So, depending on your goal, you might want to choose the system. If you're satisfied with whatever you get out of your phone, that is great. But me, I'm sorry, I'm not, and that's why I still choose my Sony a7C II with my G Master lenses. And of course, I do have my Pocket 3. Why not, right? So, oh, by the way, I use my Pocket 3 for dynamic time lapse. If you haven't tried the dynamic time lapse from DJI Pocket 3, I highly suggest you to try it. It's awesome. And if you were owning a DJI gimbal, the newer ones, that is the DJI RS Mini 4. I tried the dynamic image stabilization, sorry, dynamic time lapse. What am I saying? I've been talking for so long, so let me have a cup of water. Okay, sip of water. Yeah. Anyway, if you own the new DJI gimbals, they can do dynamic time lapse if you have a stabler tripod. Okay, you make sure you have a stable tripod because the gimbal moves all the time. So once you have that, set it up and you get some amazing footage out of it. So in my recent trip, I tried it. My next vlog, it's gonna come up, so stay tuned for that as well. Yeah. Any more questions, guys? Thanks for sticking along for so long. I really appreciate everybody who joined this live stream. If you have any questions, comments, please let me know. What I'm trying to say here is we have to compromise any one of these, right? So either you compromise the size or you compromise the price. You want better quality, you choose a heavier lens and get a better quality. If you want a lighter lens, you probably compromise on the portability, right? So there is a compromise on whatever you choose, but depending on your goal, you should not forget the goal. Excuse me. You should never forget the goal. Depending on the goal, you choose the right things for you, and thereby you get what you need, right? So APS-C lenses may not be always lighter, cheaper, or whatnot, right? Smaller. It might be bigger, depending on what you need. Like the prime example for that is the 27 f1.2 on an APS-C lens, on an APS-C camera versus the 38mm f1.8 on a full frame camera. So I did make a video on that too. So let me show you. If you're shooting commercial work for advertisements, you go for the best camera bar lens. If you are just doing talking head videos for YouTube, you can even use smartphone. Absolutely right. If you're just doing stuff for YouTube or Instagram, just stick with your whatever you have, right? You can start. Okay, one thing I would say is whatever you have, whether it is phone or whether it is a point and shoot camera or your DJI Pocket 3, for example, make sure you have good audio quality. If you're into video, right? Make sure you have good audio quality and don't feel shy to invest in audio work, because if the audio is bad, no one is going to watch your content. So make sure if you're talking, audio is super important. I have made several videos on the audio as well, but I will give you some tidbits in this video in the next few minutes. But before that, I want to show you where I made this comparison. So here it is. In this video, the field of view comparison between 27 f1.2 with A7C2 versus, using the A6700. I compared the field of view and I gave a lot of crop factors, more information on how both of them compare. In that video, I actually liked the 27mm f1.2 over the 35mm f1.8 because it's just so much blurrier, especially when mounted on a full frame camera. I was just reading your mind. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. Right. So thanks, buddy. So yeah, audio. Let me come to audio. Don't buy Interview Pro. It's a bad investment. Or don't buy any microphones with the names, the Chinese names, right? Like the Homika ones, the Boya ones, Mawo something, all these things. A lot of brands are coming up. All those are coming up with a lot of bells and whistles. All those brands may say that, hey, I'm giving you 32-bit float audio recording option. I'm giving you wireless option. I'm giving you easy portability, whatnot, right? I've seen the Holy Land is making some really tiny microphones. We should understand physics again, right? So let's go back to what audio is. Audio is like changing the sound. The changes, the vibrations in the sound that need to be captured by a proper capturing device. That's the mic. And these mic need to have a larger surface to capture accurately. And if it's not accurate, it's picking up all the surrounding sounds. So the basis for having a good mic is to make sure the audio recording, audio capturing device is actually capable of capturing good way of, like the circuitry, right? Many of the microphones that I have seen introduces a lot of sound, noise, the hiss sound, whatever it is. It's very difficult to remove them in the post. Don't use omnidirectional mics. Never use omnidirectional mics, please. Let me make myself big here because I think I will be explaining most of these stuff now. So don't use omnidirectional mics, whatever it is, a Rode lavalier or DJI lavalier, or don't use any of the lavaliers unless they are directional, right? There are very few directional microphones that are lavaliers. And yeah, I will explain in a bit about Rode or DJI. Those are the two I owned and they are pretty good. Yes, they are. I don't do a lot of video, but I have to do bits and pieces, and yeah, they're reliable. I would say this. I got my DJI wireless mic version 1 and I've used it for a lot of my videos in the past. And now I own DJI mic 2s just because they can connect with the smart shoe that's there on the cameras, Sony cameras, right? It's super convenient to use the DJI wireless mic 2. But before the DJI wireless mic 2, I was using the Rode Wireless Pros. Rode Wireless Pro is super annoying to use. I will give you like 3 reasons in this video, and I will make a separate video on that, right? So one thing about the Rode wireless system is that you need to have the app, Rode Central app installed to actually transfer the files from the Rode devices to the computer. You need to have that application installed in your phone to actually see those files, and you have very limited options when it comes to Rode apps, right? So there's always a requirement for an app to be installed for you to see the files when it is recorded on the transmitters. When it comes to DJI though, you don't need that. It acts as a USB interface. Like you can just copy the files, delete the files, or manipulate those files however you want. And that I say is the biggest advantage, because whenever I'm traveling, I have the Rode mics recording the audio, and I can just connect it with my smartphone, take up a backup, and I can use it however I want. Rode, on the other hand, the wireless systems is a no-go. If I were to recommend Rode mics, I would recommend the Rode NT1 Gen 5 and my background. That's my go-to audio recording device for voiceovers or any of my YouTube videos. And this one I'm using is Shure SM57. I just wanted to buy this because the internet is raving about this Shure SM57, so I wanted to see how it works. I don't like it as much as I like my other microphones. For shotgun mic, I have the Sennheiser MK600. That is a great mic. It's super versatile. I can use it with both XLR cable, and I can use it with a 3.5mm jack, which I predominantly use it connected to my DJI mic too. So the system need to help you create your content in a much faster way, in a more efficient way. And I think in that regard, DJI are pretty good. When it comes to the physical mics itself, Rode is good. I used to use a Rode NT-G5, which I sold, and I regret selling it. So yeah, if you're owning a Rode NT-G5, don't sell it. Just keep it. It's an awesome mic. And I replaced that with the Sennheiser MK600 just for its versatility. And I like doing my live streams with my Sennheiser MK600. You might think it's a shotgun mic, but there is a reason it's working great for live streaming, and I will explain that in a different video. So yeah, that's my mic collection. I have a lot. I tried a lot. I made a lot of videos on that. And the reason why you need to have a proper mic from brands like Sennheiser, Rode, or even DJI for specific purpose. Of course, if you're traveling, you need to have that clipped. Go for DJI mic too. If you're recording in studio, go for a mic like this, the Rode NT1 Gen 5. Or if you're doing live streams or you need a shotgun mic, go for Sennheiser MK600 or something similar. Don't go for anything like Comica or some other brands. I do not recommend any of those. So yeah, that's about the audio. And we have come to the 1 hour mark. I think we are done discussing about the APS-C lenses versus the full frame lenses. It's not exactly versus though. It depends on what you need, and different lenses will help you achieve different things. And based on my experience and based on our analysis here, APS-C lenses are great. It's light. It is sometimes cheaper, and yeah, but you may not get proper results if you're not using it right? So you might think the popular lenses will help you achieve proper results, but in my experience, sometimes they become too overwhelming for you to use. So I even used a 24mm f1.4 with my Sony FX30. That combination is exceptional. There's one video I made on this channel using that combination, and I was amazed by the quality. And if you're thinking of buying a video specific camera, I highly recommend you to go with FX30 instead of FX2 because of the poor rolling shutter performance. Yeah, I do not recommend A7C II today for any of the videos because of very bad rolling shutter. If you are going to buy any cameras, just wait, hold on your purchase until the new cameras are announced this year. So yeah, just hold on your purchase until then. So today I would not recommend A7C II for videos, but yeah, that's something you can consider just for the portability purpose. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining this live stream. Thank you for your comments. I hope you get benefited. And that's about it for our today's video. Meet you again on my next live stream next weekend. See you. Peace.